Skateboarding is something that originally came from surfboarding, which is the same thing but on water. Now, this created that very heavily intertwined DIY aspect that comes into skateboarding, as surfers took whatever they had to create skateboards, the original form. Now, this progressed over the years, combining with the community aspect and the culture of it being formed of making do with what you have. The original skateboarders, when there wasn't any skate parks, there was freestyle street skating, or when vert skating came about, it was pools. Just things people had about. This births the identity that it has today being all about DIY and community expression. Recognisable brands like Thrasher were born within this punk rock scene, where it was all about self-expression and risk-taking, which is something that quite heavily aligned with the predominantly masculine teenage audience that was in skateboarding at this period. This incentivised skateboarding in places you weren't really allowed to, and messing with security, and generally giving the finger to anybody who said otherwise. Media outlets of the time saw this and used it to push the negative connotations around skateboarding onto the public, which further pushed them into this rebellious and anti-corporate nature. Despite the early prejudices in the early forms of skateboarding, it still remains something for everyone and something anyone can enjoy, with no goalposts set to really compare yourself to anyone else or really needing to hit a target. It's more of something that you do for fun and to really creatively express yourself with what you can see and what you can come up with. The original Skate trilogy captures it perfectly, with notes of self-expression and the DIY culture surrounding skateboarding being sprinkled into the map designs, characters and story, keeping it true to life and gritty. Being anti-establishment is a dominant theme within these early games that made them feel quite authentic and a real portrayal of a skateboarder's experience, especially through these times. This is why they were cult classics and absolutely loved by the community at the time, and still today. They really allowed players to express themselves, unless you're a woman within Skate 1. Professional skateboarders were even featured during these times, which just added another layer of community culture where recognisable figures were present and you could actually interact with them.
What is really going on inside the brain of a fish?
You'd be introduced to missions through cutscenes with them, and you would also be introduced to the entire game through an intro cinematic that was present in all three previous entries, highlighting their real-life personality aspects in a cheesy but a tone-appropriate style. The sound design and music of these early games also really encapsulated that street style, with the punk rock aspect that was the original formation of the culture really taking centre stage. The hip hop tracks also served to encapsulate the gritty reality of the streets that people were actually skateboarding in. Adding a layer of anti-authoritarianism, this added a fantastic and culturally appropriate soundtrack to make the experience just that much better. Cosmetics are arguably the biggest form of self-expression through these games, behind the actual gameplay of making what you want out of what the environment is, just like real skateboarding, where you can envision something and make it happen. These cosmetics would be unlockable through gameplay. However, in the latest release, most of the cosmetics that you'd actually want are locked behind paywall, forcing you to cough up some cash if you actually want to express yourself, as the unlockable items are just pitiful. And items that are even paywalled are sometimes just lazily duplicated from unlockable items that make it feel like a bit of a spit in the face. They've also shoddily recreated things from the previous games just to bait people into a bit of nostalgia for what once was. And they don't compare in quality at all, considering these previous entries had them unlockable with gameplay. Not money. It was a reward for playing the game and actually being a part of it. Customization features have also further regressed. As before, you were able to adjust the tightness of your trucks, which allowed you to turn faster or slower. You were also able to change the hardness of your wheels, which would allow for longer power slides or better grip, depending on the situation you need, which would make the gameplay a lot more dynamic and personal to how you like to play. It overall feels like a giant step backwards in terms of gameplay, with the earlier entries even allowing you to change the colour of your clothing right from the get-go without having to pay anything. However, the clothes that are included in the latest entry are just tops that say, "I love Sandval." The characters are far removed from what they once were, lacking that substance and physical interaction, now just being reduced down to a stylized picture.
The new game is a load of ass, man. I mean, come on, I'm not even present. I'm just a shitty PNG, bro. What did they do to me?
They're still voiced by pro skaters, which aren't voice actors, which previously it made sense because they were physically present in the game. However, now it just feels like a shallow attempt to inject some culture where it just has no relation. These same principles also apply to your filming companion, which has been replaced by an AI called V.
That's some sick footy, my home dog.
What the fuck is this clanker talking about?
Taking away that physical filming aspect that would be part of the real life community culture, where you would bring a friend along to physically do it with you. Now, this absolute annoyance of a character is the first thing you interact with right from the get-go out of the tutorial, where they teach you how to play the game in a very poor way. Now, you're wondering, how did you get here? In the previous games, the story would introduce you, whether it would be you were in an accident and you had to learn how to skate again, you're getting rejected by a magazine, you need to create your own brand to get sponsorships. Let's stand up for this one. You were introduced to the game and city by the fucking city council. It can't get more out of touch. Oh, like, seriously, I don't know how much more estranged from skateboarding culture you can get when you are introduced to skateboarding by the fucking government. What? Now, within this city, everything is designed around skateboarding. The place doesn't even feel real because everything is perfectly angled or straight up just ramps all over the place for you to skateboard on, which kind of goes against the original narrative of making what you want out of what's available. In the previous games, it obviously was designed to be a skateboarding game. However, it was so much more subtle in the way of you could still envision things like you would in real life, where you would see a rail or a gap or a bench or something that you could think, I can make this work, rather than it all just being laid out on a platter for you. And it just makes it feel a bit meticulously designed and off-tone. For how much the game goes on about skater eyes, you really don't have to use them. This just makes the world overall feel empty and fabricated. Even with the NPCs in game, they don't serve any purpose. They just aimlessly wander around, and you can't even interact with them, like in previous titles where you could get into fights or be chased around by security and pushed off your board, or even get tased. It really creates that feeling of you are a player in a created world, rather than you're actually in a place and other people have an interaction with you. This time, they either dodge away at light speed or you phase through them. Now, the security guard feature would have been really nice to see, because as in real life, skateboards aren't allowed everywhere. Even though places can be public spaces, they're not always. And sometimes businesses just don't want you about. You're seen as a nuisance, which is this rebellious and defiance aspect that's just completely torn away from the game, with the fact that the city council wants you doing it. This completely breaks the immersion and the attachment to the culture that the game should have.
It's got no soul, man. They stripped it down, polished it up, and now it's just this corporate sanitized thing with the logo on it.
There are physical aspects introduced to this game, like shops, but none of them can be entered. They're very sanitized and bland, and even the shops that you are supposed to interact with simply brings up a menu. There's no shopkeeper, there's no nothing. Now, the game further regresses in this interaction aspect, with the inability to really manipulate your environment like previous games. If something was in your way, say like a bin, you could grab it and move it. But in the newest release, that's completely gone, which results in this, despite it being a meticulously designed environment for you to skateboard in, if the developers have chose to put a bin somewhere, or a lamppost, or something, that's it. That's the final say, which kind of goes against the whole idea of doing it yourself and making it work. The object dropper in this game has also just been reduced down to 5 pieces, where in previous games you could put down to pretty much your heart's content with a wide variety of objects. Like, if you wanted to put a bin down, you could. Say you wanted to do a trick over that, it was possible. The latest release, it's just like ramps and rails and skateboarder stuff. Not to forget to mention that in the previous game, there was an entire skate park editor. So where you could actually build your own skate parks or lines to do whatever you wanted to with your friends. But they've also made it frustrating to use, where it regularly is irritating and bugs. Now, despite being a place that supposedly lives and breathes skateboarding, the entire place is spotless. No grinds, no scuff marks, no nothing. It's just frozen in time almost. Now, the game presents that the idea is there's crews that skate around and actually live there. There's posters and graffiti plastered everywhere, but they're nowhere to be seen. They don't exist. You can't even enter the hideouts, there's nothing. Your only interaction in this game is supposed to come from other players, as it's an online-only multiplayer game. However, the communication aspect has been completely dumbed down to a wheel of interactions with some preset phrases. Now this further contributes to just the lonely feeling within the game that you truly are just in a skateboarding simulator. You're just skating about. That's it. Which I feel like skateboarding culture is so much more than that. The soundtrack also follows in similar footsteps to the previous entries, maybe with a few sizes too small, as it's missing that anti-establishment and real raw feeling of the previous tracks, with also some potentially AI generated music sprinkled through, just under the name Universal Music, which again just completely tears the personal touch and that individual aspect and message that could come from songs that just add to the experience and make it that much greater. Now these are a lot more polished and sanitized and just not emotional. Now, due to the lack of story or any sign of progression within the game, it makes all the missions feel quite pointless. You're not really doing it for any other reason than to tick boxes, which is not what skateboarding is about. It's not about goalposts and completing things. It's about doing it with purpose. This satisfaction that usually comes from the previous games, where you would find a spot and you were told to do something cool with it, is just completely removed when everywhere has skateboarding in mind. To make everything worse, your actual skateboarding expression is removed because there's missing tricks. I just feel like it's a bit ridiculous to spend 15 years between the previous game and this one and to have less expression on the skateboard. Whether it's finger flips, dart catches, or other things, it's missing. Now these things were used in skateboarding as a form of expression, and new tricks were being created left, right and centre through like the 90s to 2010s, because people were finding more and more ways to make themselves look cool on a skateboard. But this issue is only compounded when you look at the actual core gameplay, where so many mission styles are missing, such as death races, where your life was actually almost on the line. You could bump into the other skaters. It added that risk factor that was really prevalent within the roots of skateboarding. Previous games would also feature pro challenges, where you go head to head with a professional skateboarder to complete a variety of challenges like 1-up, where you would go back to back over rounds to who could get the best score, or follow missions where you would just have to stay within a certain distance of them. Other challenges included photo and film challenges where you would have to complete tricks in a certain location. There are also jams where you would go head to head with multiple skaters in the same location, competing for the highest score or best trick. There was also finally demos where you would have to complete tricks in front of a crowd to impress them, where it's now again just more about ticking boxes rather than actually progressing a narrative and feeling like you're actually improving. Now for probably the most famous skateboarding game of all time. Skate. The concept is one skater would set a trick and then the other skater has to copy this. If not, you get a letter. And you would go back and forth until either one of you spelled out skate. You need a pre-formed party. There's no matchmaking. There's no real sense of meeting new people. You either have some friends or you arrange it in advance. Otherwise, you have to play on your own, which I think is absolutely bombastic for a multiplayer game. It baffles me how little variety there is and culturally appreciated game modes, but these are all stripped down and only really serve to get currency called rip chips. One of the 3 currencies, might I add, and what this is used for: gambling. You are expected to then grind for this currency, go to the shop, go to the loot boxes, all the way at the bottom of the store, behind all of the in-game microtransactions that you have to spend real money on, and then to gamble for maybe getting an item you like, which is just a complete misstep as to what skateboarding culture really is. The most recent update also compounded this further, with reducing the amount of currency and experience you get per mission, meaning you have to do more to then also meet the higher amount of experience you need per level and per loot box, resulting in you having to do more for less. This is now just a tedious and grindy experience, which just removes you from the skateboarding culture as a whole, where you should be having fun. This only gets worse when you consider that they've added a battle pass, which is essentially a system where over the course of a season or just a set amount of days, you have challenges to complete, where you earn a different currency to then spend and unlock things from this pass. However, it's designed in such a way where even if you're to complete it after spending real money on it, you have to buy it again, and again, rather than being able to unlock enough currency from the previous one to then take forward into the next one, as seen in literally every other title ever. Now, these included items are not really even culturally relevant. You'd think if you have to spend real money on it, you would be able to get branded attire. Now, some of these items have also been false advertised because they're not present within the past, despite being present in the marketing material. Now, it was also advertised that you could convert this Pix currency into RIP chips, but this is nowhere to be seen, and just feels like backpedaling greed. Now finally, probably the worst offence to the community and culture around this game, the stunt mode. Now, in previous titles, coming from the Thrasher skateboard magazine, there was something called Hall of Meat. However, in this game, it's completely sanitized and basically removed from what it once was, which is why it's been renamed to Stunt. Now, in previous games, the objective was to basically hurt yourself as much as possible. There was a 3D skeleton model inside you where you could physically, you could see you were breaking bones, and you would get points for this by doing it as cool as possible. You'd get style points and causing as much destruction as possible, which is really within the theme of skateboarding as a whole. But instead, you have this corporate technology, Impervatech, where it basically makes you completely invulnerable. There's no risk. It goes the same with the mission objectives in these. It's just menial, arbitrary tasks of jump into 5 bins, jump through this thing. We want challenge and style and culture, where we could actually have the original mode of causing harm to yourself, essentially. These factors just make the game feel super one-dimensional, with no real purpose in what you're doing, and everything's just squeaky clean and boring. Not to mention the art style, but that's a hot topic for another day. This ultimately results in the game feeling boring and nothing more than to just keep your attention and keep your time and keep you playing, so they can make a little bit more money rather than actually expressing yourself and connecting with other people.